In the small frontier town of Cedar Ridge, the autumn wind carried dust and whispers through the wooden buildings. It was 1885, and life moved slowly here, except on auction days. The courthouse square filled with people who came to buy and sell, their voices mixing with the sound of horses and wagons on the dirt roads. William Thompson stood at the edge of the courthouse square, his weathered hands gripping his worn brown hat. He was a tall man with kind blue eyes and gray hair that showed his 42 years. He had come to town for supplies like he did every month, but something made him stop today. His boots stayed planted on the dusty ground as he watched what was happening on the wooden steps. On the courthouse steps, a young woman held her son close to her side. Her name was Emma, and she was barely 25 years old. The worry had made lines round her green eyes. Her red hair was pulled back neatly, but her simple dress showed the wear of hard times. Her round belly told everyone that she would have another child soon, maybe in just a few months. Emma's husband had died in a terrible mining accident 3 months ago. The cave-in had taken 5 men that day, leaving behind 5 families with no money and many debts. Emma had tried to work, but no one would hire a pregnant woman. The bills kept coming, and the money kept running out. Now she stood here with her 8-year-old boy James, waiting for someone to take them in as workers to pay off what they owed. James stood close to his mother, his small hand holding tight to her skirt. He had his father's brown hair and his mother's green eyes, but now those eyes were filled with fear. At 8 years old, he understood enough to know that their life was about to change completely. He pressed his face against his mother's arm, trying to hide from the staring crowd. The crowd gathered round the steps, but their faces were cold and unfriendly. Some whispered cruel words about Emma being from Ireland, saying she was different and did not belong here. Others talked about her condition, saying no one should take on a pregnant woman and a child. The words carried on the wind, reaching Emma's ears and making her hold James even tighter. "She's too much trouble," one man called out from the back of the crowd. "Who wants a pregnant woman and a child? They'll eat more than they can work." Another voice joined in. "Irish folks bring nothing but problems. Send them back where they came from." William felt his heart break watching the fear grow in little James's eyes. The boy was trying so hard to be brave, but William could see his small shoulders shaking. Emma kept her chin up, but tears were starting to form in her eyes. She whispered something to James, probably telling him everything would be all right, even though she was not sure herself. The auctioneer, a heavy man with a loud voice, called for bids. "Who will take this woman and boy? They can work hard and earn their keep. Start the bidding at $50 for both." The crowd was silent. People looked at each other, but no one raised their hand. $50 was a lot of money, and taking care of 2 people, soon to be 3, would cost much more. $40, the auctioneer called, lowering the price. Still no one moved. William felt something burning in his chest. He had seen many hard things in his life, but watching a mother and child being treated like cattle at a market made him angry and sad at the same time. He thought about his own wife, who had died 5 years ago from fever. He thought about the children they had never been able to have. His ranch house had been quiet and empty for so long. $30. The auctioneer tried again. "Come now, folks, this is a good deal." William stepped forward. His boots clacked on the wooden steps as he climbed toward Emma. The crowd grew quiet, watching this tall rancher with curious eyes. They knew William Thompson as a quiet man who kept to himself and always paid his bills on time. "I'll take care of their debt," William said in a steady voice that carried across the square. "All of it. Every penny they owe. The auctioneer looked surprised. "Well now, Mr. Thompson, that's very generous. The total debt is $120. I'll pay it," William said without hesitation, "and they'll come to my ranch as family. Not workers." Em looked up at him with tears in her green eyes. She had never seen such kindness from a stranger. In her 25 years, most people had judged her for being Irish, for being poor, for being different. But this man's eyes held only warmth and understanding. William Thompson had lived alone on his ranch for 5 years, ever since his beloved wife Mary had died. His heart had been empty for so long. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to care for others. The house that had once been filled with love and laughter had become just a place to sleep and eat. But looking at Emma and James, he felt something wake up inside him. "You don't have to do this, sir," Emma whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "We're strangers to you." "Yes, I do," William replied gently, his voice soft but firm. "Every child deserves a safe home. Every mother deserves help when she needs it." The crowd watched in amazement as William counted out the money and handed it to the auctioneer. Some people nodded in approval, while others shook their heads, thinking he was making a mistake. As they walked away from the courthouse together, William carrying their small bundle of belongings, he felt something change deep inside him. He had made a choice that would change all their lives forever. For the first time in 5 years, he was not walking home alone. The Thompson Ranch sat in a peaceful valley surrounded by rolling green hills that seemed to go on forever. It was a simple place, but clean and well kept, with a wooden house painted white, a red barn that stood tall against the sky, and fields that stretched all the way to the horizon. Cattle grazed in the pastures, and chickens pecked round the yard, making soft clucking sounds in the afternoon sun. Emma felt her stomach twist with nervousness as their wagon rolled up the dirt path to the house. She had been used to taking care of herself and James for 3 months now. Ever since her husband died, she had learned to be strong and independent, even when things got hard. Now this kind stranger was offering them a real home, and she did not know what to expect. William climbed down from the wagon and reached up to help Emma down carefully. Being gentle because of her condition, James jumped down on his own, his eyes wide as he looked round at everything. He had never lived on a ranch before, and everything seemed big and new and exciting. "You can have the room upstairs," William said, carrying their small bag that held everything they owned. "It has a nice window that looks out over the hills. James can sleep in the room next to yours. It used to be." He stopped talking for a moment, and Emma saw sadness cross his face. It was meant to be a child's room. Emma understood without him saying more. William and his wife had planned to have children, but never got the chance. Now James would sleep in that room, bringing the sound of a child's voice to a house that had been quiet for too long. That first week was very quiet. Emma helped with cooking and mending clothes. Even though William kept telling her to rest and take care of herself, she was too proud to sit around doing nothing while he worked hard to take care of them. Her hands were used to work, and staying busy helped her feel less like a burden. James quickly found his place on the ranch. He fed the chickens every morning, scattering corn while they flapped and squawked round his feet. He helped William with small tasks like carrying tools and filling water buckets. The boy was eager to help and quick to learn, and William enjoyed teaching him about ranch life. Slowly, day by day, trust began to grow between the three of them in the evenings. After the work was done and dinner was finished, they would sit by the fireplace in the main room. William would take down old books from the shelf and help James read better, pointing to words and helping him sound out the hard ones. James was smart and wanted to learn, and his reading got better every day. Emma would share stories about Ireland, about the green hills and stone walls, about her grandmother's cottage near the sea. She taught them both simple songs that her mother had sung to her when she was little. Her voice was sweet and clear, and it filled the house with a warmth that had been missing for years. William had forgotten how wonderful it was to hear laughter in his house. James's curious questions about everything from why cows had spots to how far away the stars were brought joy to rooms that had been cold and empty. Emma's gentle smile when she watched James learn something new made William's heart feel full in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. The days grew shorter and colder as autumn turned to winter. Emma's belly grew bigger, and William made sure she had everything she needed. He chopped extra wood for the fireplace and made sure the house stayed warm. He bought soft fabric in town so Emma could make clothes for the baby. Winter came early that year, with snow falling thick and heavy by the middle of November. One snowy night in December, when the wind howled around the house and snow piled up against the windows, Emma went into labor. The pains started after dinner and got stronger as the night went on. William looked out at the storm and knew there was no way to get to town. The doctor lived 15 miles away, and the roads were blocked with snow. The wind was so strong it would be dangerous for a horse and rider to travel. William had helped animals give birth many times before, but never a human baby. His hands shook as he boiled water on the stove and gathered the cleanest blankets he could find. Emma was trying to be brave, but he could see she was scared and in pain. "You can do this, Emma," he said softly, kneeling beside her bed and holding her hand. "You're the strongest person I know. This baby is lucky to have you as a mother." James stayed in his room like William had told him, but he could hear what was happening. He knelt by his bed and prayed like his mother had taught him, asking God to keep his mother and the new baby safe. The hours passed slowly. Emma worked hard, and William stayed with her, bringing cool cloths for her face and encouraging her when the pain got bad. Just before dawn, when the snow finally stopped falling, a healthy baby girl was born. She had tiny fingers and toes, and a loud, strong cry that filled the quiet house. Emma named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew near the ranch in spring. She said the baby was like those flowers, beautiful and strong, able to bloom even after the hardest winter. As William held the tiny baby for the first time, feeling her small weight in his big, rough hands, he felt his heart completely heal. All the sadness and loneliness from the past 5 years seemed to melt away. He looked at Emma, tired but smiling with joy, and at James, who was gently touching his new sister's tiny hand with wonder in his eyes. They were not related by blood, but sitting there in the early morning light, with snow sparkling outside the windows, they had become a real family. Love had brought them together, and love would keep them strong. Spring brought new challenges to their little family that they had not expected. The snow melted away, and the world turned green again. But with the warmer weather came trips to town for supplies. William needed to buy seed for planting, and Emma needed things for baby Rose. These trips to Cedar Ridge became harder and harder as the weeks went by. When they went to town for supplies, Emma noticed right away how people stared at them. She would walk down the wooden sidewalk carrying Rose, with James holding her hand and William beside them, and she could feel eyes watching their every move. Some shopkeepers were openly rude, speaking to them in cold voices and making them wait longer than other customers. Others simply ignored them completely, pretending they were not even there. The children in town were often the cruelest of all. When Emma and William were busy shopping, groups of boys would surround James and call him names. They said mean things about his mother and baby sister. and they pushed him when the adults were not looking. James tried to be brave, but Emma could see the hurt in his eyes when they came home. "Why don't they like us, William?" James asked one day after children at the general store had called him terrible names and told him to go back where he came from. His voice was small and confused, and there were tears he was trying not to cry. William knelt down to James's level, putting his big hands on the boy's thin shoulders. He looked into James's green eyes, so much like his mother's, and tried to find the right words to explain something that did not make sense even to adults. "Some people are afraid of what they don't understand," William said gently. "They see that your mother talks differently because she comes from Ireland, and they think that makes her bad. But that doesn't make them right. You and your mother and little Rose are good people, and that's what matters." The real trouble started when Robert Hayes, the wealthiest rancher in the area, came to visit William on a warm day in April. Robert was a tall, proud man with grey hair and expensive clothes who owned half the land around Cedar Ridge. He had more money and power than anyone else from miles round, and he was used to getting his way in everything. Robert rode up to the ranch on his finest horse, and did not even bother to get down. He sat high in his saddle, looking down at William like he was something small and unimportant. "Thompson, you're making a big mistake," Robert said, his voice cold and commanding. He pointed toward the house where Emma was hanging laundry on the line. "People are talking all over town. They don't like you keeping that Irish woman and her children here like this." William stood straighter, his jaw setting in a firm line. "They're my family now," he replied, his voice steady but with an edge of warning. "What I do on my own land is my business." Robert's eyes narrowed. "She's not your wife. And those aren't your children," he continued, his words sharp as knives. "You're bringing shame to all the decent folks round here. People think you're living in sin, and they don't like it one bit. Send them away, or you'll find yourself with no friends and no business." The threat hung in the air between them like storm clouds. Robert Hayes had enough influence to ruin any man in the area if he wanted to. He could convince people not to buy William's cattle, could get the bank to call in loans early, could make life very difficult for anyone who crossed him. After Robert left, riding away with his head high and his back straight, Emma came out of the house. She had heard every word through the open windows, and her face was pale with worry. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to baby Rose breathing softly in her crib and thinking about everything Robert Hayes had said. Emma loved William like a husband and trusted him completely. But she did not want to cause him trouble. She had seen what happened to people who crossed the powerful men in town. She had seen families lose everything and have to leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs. "Maybe I should take the children and go," she told William the next morning as they sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Her voice was quiet, but William could hear the pain in it. "I don't want to ruin your life." William set down his coffee cup with a sharp sound and reached across the table to take her hands in his. His eyes were fierce with determination, and his voice was stronger than Emma had ever heard it. "No," William said firmly. "This is your home. This is where you belong. I won't let anyone drive my family away. Not Robert Hayes or anyone else." But the pressure from the town grew stronger as the days passed. Some people stopped buying cattle from William, saying they would rather do business with someone else. Others crossed the street when they saw him coming, turning their backs and whispering to each other. The banker looked at him with cold eyes when he came to make his monthly payment. Emma felt the weight of their disapproval every time she went to town. The stairs felt like physical things pressing down on her shoulders. She began to wonder if Love was enough to protect them from a world that did not want them to be together. She started to doubt whether they could survive against so much hatred. One evening, as they sat by the fire with little Rose sleeping peacefully in Emma's arms, William made a promise that would stay with them through all the dark days ahead. "Whatever happens, we face it together," he said, looking at each of them in turn. "Family doesn't abandon family, no matter what anyone else says or does." James looked up from his book and smiled, his young face bright with hope. "We're really a family, aren't we? Forever," William said, and he meant every word. The harassment grew much worse as summer arrived, bringing heat and trouble to the Thompson ranch. Someone came in the night and trampled Emma's vegetable garden, destroying the tomatoes and beans she had worked so hard to grow. The plants lay broken and dying in the dirt, and Emma cried when she saw them in the morning light. Anonymous letters appeared under their door almost every week, telling them to leave town or face worse consequences. The letters were written in angry handwriting, with words that hurt Emma's heart. She would read them quietly and then burn them in the fireplace so James would not see the cruel things people wrote out his family, the bank, influenced by Robert Hayes and his friends, threatened to call in William's loans early. The banker, a thin man with cold eyes, told William he had 30 days to pay back money that was not due for another year. William knew this was impossible, and he began to worry about losing the ranch that had been his home for so long. Emma felt responsible for all the trouble that was falling on William like a dark cloud. She knew that before she and her children came, William had been respected in town. People had liked him and trusted him. Now he was losing friends and money because he had chosen to help them. Late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone else was sleeping, Emma would sit by Rose's crib and wonder if she had made the right choice staying. She would watch her baby daughter sleep peacefully, not knowing about the trouble her presence had caused. Emma's heart leaped as she thought about taking her children and leaving, even though the idea of being apart from William felt like losing part of her soul. But then something happened on a hot July day that changed everything for their family and the whole town. A terrible accident occurred at Robert Hayes's ranch. His youngest son, Peter, was playing behind the big house when he fell into the old well that had been covered with rotting boards. The boy was only 6 years old, small and frightened, and the well was deep and narrow, going down 20 feet into darkness. Peter's screams for help brought everyone running. His mother found him first and began crying for someone to save her baby. Word spread quickly through town like wildfire. People came from everywhere, gathering at the Hayes ranch to see what could be done. Robert Hayes stood at the edge of the well, calling down to his son, but no one knew how to get the boy out safely. Peter was trapped 20 feet down, crying for help in a small, scared voice that echoed up from the darkness. The well was old and the stones were loose, making it dangerous for anyone to try to go down. "He's too small," the men said, looking at each other with worried faces. "None of us can fit down there. We are all too big and heavy." The well opening was barely wide enough for a child to fit through. A grown man would get stuck or cause the stones to fall and hurt Peter even more. Everyone stood round feeling helpless, listening to the little boy's cries getting weaker. Then someone remembered James, at 8 years old. He was thin and small enough to fit through the narrow opening. He was also smart and brave, and everyone in town knew he was a good boy despite what some people said about his family. When William, Emma, and James arrived at the Hayes ranch, having heard the news from a neighbor, they found a crowd of people standing round the well. Robert Hayes was desperate. his face white with fear and his hands shaking. His pride was completely gone, replaced by a father's terror at the thought of losing his child, Robert Hayes. The same man who had threatened William and demanded that he send Emma and her children away, now looked at them with pleading eyes. He swallowed his pride and walked over to William. "Please." Robert begged William, his voice breaking. "Your boy is the only one who can reach Peter. He's small enough to fit down there. Please help us." James looked up at William and Emma with serious eyes. He could hear Peter crying down in the well, and he knew the little boy was scared and hurt. James was frightened too, but he knew what he had to do. He had always been taught to help others when they needed it. "I'll go down," James said bravely, his young voice steady despite his fear. "Peter needs help, and I can fit down there." The men quickly found a strong rope and tied it carefully around James's waist. They tested it several times to make sure it would hold. Emma knelt down and kissed James's forehead, her eyes full of love and worry. "Be careful, my brave boy," she whispered. "Come back to us safely." James nodded and walked to the edge of the well. The men lowered him slowly into the darkness, and he disappeared from sight. Everyone held their breath as they heard his voice echoing up from below, talking to Peter in a calm, gentle way. "It's okay, Peter," James called down. "I'm here to help you. Don't be scared." For 20 long minutes, James worked in the dark well, talking to Peter and helping him get ready to be pulled up. The crowd above waited in silence, praying that both boys would come up safely. Finally, they pulled both boys to safety. Peter was hurt but alive, and James was covered in dirt but smiling. The crowd cheered as they saw both children safe in the sunlight again. Robert Hayes looked at James with tears in his eyes, seeing the boy not as an outsider but as the hero who had saved his son's life. Then he turned to William and Emma, his face full of shame and gratitude. "I was wrong," Robert said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." That day, the whole town saw what kind of people William, Emma, and James really were. They were not outsiders or troublemakers. They were good people who cared about others and would risk their own safety to help a child in need. The tide had turned in their favor, but their biggest test was still to come. The rescue of Peter Hayes changed everything about how the town saw William's family. It was like watching ice melt in the spring sunshine. People who had crossed the street to avoid them now began to greet them with friendly nods and warm smiles. The shopkeepers who had once been cold and rude now served them with respect, asking about baby Rose and how the ranch was doing. Children who had once teased James and called him names now wanted to play with him. They had seen how brave he was, how he had risked his own safety to save Peter Hayes, and they admired him for it. James found himself with real friends for the first time since coming to Cedar Ridge. Boys who invited him to fish in the creek and play games after school. But even with all these good changes, Emma still felt like something important was missing from their lives. She and William loved each other deeply, with a love that had grown stronger every day since they first met on those courthouse steps. They lived together like husband and wife, caring for their children and working side by side on the ranch. But they had never spoken about marriage. This worried Emma more than she wanted to admit. She was afraid to bring up the subject herself, worried that asking might change the beautiful relationship they had built together. What if William was happy with things just the way they were? What if he did not want to make it official? What if talking about marriage would somehow ruin the perfect life they had created? Late at night, Emma would lie awake thinking about these questions while Rose slept in her crib nearby. She loved William with all her heart, But she wanted more than just living together. She wanted to be his real wife. Wanted James and Rose to have his name. Wanted the security that only marriage could bring. One evening in September, as the leaves on the trees turned golden and red like fire, William took Emma for a walk to the hill behind their house. The air was cool and sweet, filled with the smell of autumn and the sound of crickets beginning their evening songs. Rose slept peacefully in Emma's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket that Emma had wear upon herself. James ran ahead of them, chasing fireflies that blinked like tiny stars in the growing darkness. His laughter echoed across the hills, a sound that never failed to make both William and Emma smile. He was growing tall and strong, becoming the kind of boy any parent would be proud to call their son. Emma, William said, stopping under an old oak tree that stood at the top of the hill. The tree was huge and ancient, its branches spreading wide like protective arms over the valley below. I have something important to ask you. Emma felt her heart begin to beat faster. She could hear something different in William's voice, something nervous and excited at the same time. William took off his hat and ran his fingers through his grey hair, a habit he had when he was thinking hard about something. Then, to Emma's complete surprise, he got down on one knee right there under the oak tree. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple gold ring that caught the last light of the setting sun. It was not fancy or expensive, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "This ring belonged to my mother," William said, his voice soft and full of emotion. "She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it to the woman I wanted to spend my life with." Emma's heart felt like it might burst with happiness. She had dreamed of this moment, but had not dared to hope it would really happen. "I know. We started this as strangers helping each other," William continued, looking up at her with love shining in his blue eyes. "But somewhere along the way, you became the love of my life. You and James and little Rose became my whole world. Will you marry me, Emma? Will you let me be a real father to James and Rose? Will you be my wife?" Emma's tears were happy ones, flowing down her cheeks like small rivers of joy. She could barely speak through her emotion, but she managed to whisper the words that would change their lives forever. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with happiness. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." William slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. They kissed under the old oak tree while James caught fireflies, and Rose slept peacefully in her mother's arms. They were married in October in the small church in Cedar Ridge, with the whole town coming to celebrate with them. It was the most beautiful wedding anyone could remember. Robert Hayes, the man who had once wanted to drive them away, stood proudly as William's best man. His wife helped Emma get ready, fixing her hair and adjusting her simple white dress. James wore his first real suit, looking handsome and grown up as he carried the rings down the aisle. Baby Rose slept through the entire ceremony in the arms of Mrs. Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife who had become one of Emma's closest friends. The preacher spoke beautiful words about love conquering all obstacles and about how real families are built not just by blood, but by choice and commitment, and the daily decision to care for each other. After the ceremony, there was a wonderful celebration in the town square. People brought food and music, and everyone danced under the stars. Children ran around playing games, and old men sat telling stories about the old days as the sun set behind the hills. William and Emma stood together as husband and wife, watching James play with the other children while Rose slept peacefully in her basket nearby. "We did it," Emma said softly, her hand in William's. "We really did it. We built something beautiful together." William agreed, squeezing her hand. "A family, a life, a place where love matters more than fear." 5 years later, Their family had grown to include twin boys named David and Michael, and their ranch had become one of the most successful in the area. James grew up to be a fine young man who never forgot the lesson he learned about courage and kindness. Emma often thought about that day on the courthouse steps when William first reached out his hand to help them. One simple act of kindness had changed everything, creating a ripple effect that touched not just their lives but the entire town. Their story became legend in Cedar Ridge, passed down through generations as proof that love, courage, and compassion can overcome any obstacle.